All right, well, this is a Finance Committee meeting for today, March 3rd of 2021. In attendance, we have council persons Shrimp and Bruger, myself, Council President Wolf, we have Mayor Hughes, our fiscal officer Leah Klein, and Kim Pulley in attendance. Yeah, so that's where we are. I think we have not had a meeting to review year end yet. Is that correct? Because I'm new to the Finance Committee meeting. Did we need to do anything in reviewing year end? Is there any highlights that we need to go over? Councilperson Berger is saying yes. So why don't we start there with a review of year end and those highlights? Anyone?
Yep, Kim, are you there?
We see Kim, we don't hear Kim.
Can't hear Kim.
I think she's having technical difficulties.
Yeah, she's having difficulties, she said.
Oh, she has a microphone now. I see it.
I see you now.
There we go.
Oh my gosh, guys, I got a new computer and it doesn't like Zoom. I'm so sorry.
That's why I don't Zoom at the office. Just for the record, I don't have cameras, voice. I can't do anything at my nice little computer at my desk. It doesn't like Zoom. I do it from home.
Weird.
Okay. I'm going to try and share my screen if that's okay, Brian.
Absolutely.
Okay. Fingers crossed. While we're waiting on it, I don't know if you guys kind of want to talk through like the county auditor obviously likes to wait until the last minute to send the stuff that we need.
Sure.
So I apologize that it took so long to get you that information, but I did get to send out the final 2020 statements to everybody earlier this week. So I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at them yet or not. But if you wanted to kind of touch on that first and then kind of go into where we're going, or
Yeah, that's probably good. Just a review of that, right? Give us the highlights, and if any of the council people here have questions, we can ask those. And then once we get through that, I think we wanted to start talking about projects. Oh, you just got really quiet on us, Kim.
with any luck, you're going to be able to see my spreadsheet.
Yep, I can see it now.
Oh, good. Okay, so I'm also going to try and get real quick. I didn't save it here. Okay, sorry, hang on one second. The highlights are, let's start. Okay, this is general fund. So let's just start at the top and real quick work down through in the 2020 stuff. Okay. Income tax did come in higher over 19, which we expected it to because there were a lot more homes that were a full year in 2020 than there would have been in 2019 or in 2019 than in 2018. We still didn't come in as well as we had originally anticipated, which leads me to believe that there is some COVID issue going on here. It's still, I don't think, going to hit us nearly as hard as any of the other like surrounding communities, but it is lower, and not by much, by maybe $10,000 than what we were kind of anticipating it to be. So we'll have to see. We should know in the next month or two, maybe into May, since we're on about a 2-week delay on getting things from Rita. But we should know by mid-May what 21 is going to look like. If it's a lot higher, then it's just kind of a delinquent and making up, you know, if it's people who are delinquent and going to pay, that's one thing, or if it's money that we're not going to recover because it was income lost. So in the next, let's say 8 weeks or so, we should probably have a better handle on that and what that really looks like for us. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Trace fees. So this miscellaneous is, if you kind of look across multiple years, this is a huge outlier. And this is, if you're aware, the Bureau of Workers' Compensation 3 different times during 2020 issued a dividend because it said, we know that our numbers are hurting financially. We've done really well with our investments and not having to pay out as many claims. So we have this pool of money sitting here. So we're going to allocate some of it back to you. The first 2 were pretty, I mean, they were significant in and of themselves. They were probably about what we pay in a year in a premium. So in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. And then we got one in December for $150,000.
Cool.
So that was awesome because there's really no strings attached to this money. So getting it makes our balance at the end of 2020 look a lot higher than it really is, thanks to that dividend. But that was a one-time thing. It's not something we should expect to probably ever get again. And really, it kind of keeps us, it makes up for not getting that income tax that we were planning on getting. And it's going to help us out paying for the first couple of months of that fire contract with Columbus. So some of those things that we hadn't really anticipated in 2020 beyond COVID, this is really helping out with that. And we're not going to be hit with, we're not going to be worse off because of those things happening. But it didn't, I don't want to go so far and to say we now have $150,000 that we can spend that we didn't have before, because it's really made up a lot of the difference of what we would have gotten anyway.
Right.
Almost everywhere our expenses came in under last year, and what we budgeted, it came in under, and a lot of times even under what we paid last year. And that's partly due to, you know, fiscal conservatism. We don't buy things unnecessarily, and part of that probably is due to COVID too, because we just didn't have as much activity going on. Obviously, one difference there is the EMS. This $40,000 does include the $30,000 that we paid for November and December. This $175,000 then is the contract going forward. And then when we get further down, you'll see some of this will be offset in 2021. So we'll get to that in just a second. So keep that in the back of your mind. Nothing really surprising anywhere in the parts of planning and zoning. The reason it's significantly less is partly because Eric's not working as many hours, and partly because Becky and now Lisa's hours have been allocated somewhat out of here, and also code enforcement being vacant for part of the year. So that shouldn't, I mean, it'll stay a lot lower than this 160, but it's not going to stay as low as it has been now that, well, I guess I should say, assuming that we have a code enforcement officer going forward. What was this? This is a pretty significant difference. I just want to take a look real quick and remind myself what that was. Oh, we had a lot more engineering because of the school plan development. That's why that one's so much higher. And I'm not certain. I know with MI, we were able to bill back some of that to MI. Did we set up a similar arrangement with the school or no? Do you know?
My understanding is yes, but I will verify that with Eric on Wednesday.
Thank you. Because that is not, I did not build into here that we are going to recover those costs. So if we can, awesome. But if not, if the answer is no, it doesn't change anything on here. And if the answer is yes, then it'll put us in a better spot.
I'm actually gonna send him a message right now because we did talk about it.
And is some of that extra engineering services from all the sewer stuff, is that put in there too, or is that in another place?
It's in its own fund, so
Okay.
not much of it would
Okay.
be. I want to say about 25,000 of it is the school reviews.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we spent about 60, which isn't necessarily unusual. We usually spend in the $30,000 range on engineering. So that puts us at about 35 with the 25 for the schools. Yeah, so you can see our fund balance is, I mean, the fact that that's almost a 7-figure number from when I started 4 years ago is just like flabbergasting to me. But it's also not exactly, it's not a long-term, like we have that accumulated for projects and we're going to spend it down. So it's not that we're accumulating money just to accumulate money, because as you can see, as we go out, oops, we're going to be spending more than we're taking in over the next, 5 years. A lot of which is due to the fire contract, but also due to the projects that we plan to be doing. So real quick, before we get into that, in 2021, you can see we've got transfers in and some sale of assets. These are the fund balance in the money that we were accumulating for a new EMS vehicle, that $20,000 a year. This is the balance as of December 31st. I did reach out to Jesse on that, and I kind of alluded to it in the email I sent you earlier this week, that we have the authority ourselves to go ahead and transfer that money because that program no longer exists. So I'm going to get a resolution, hopefully for the first reading next week, so that we can get that moving to get that money transferred into the general fund to pay for the contract. If it wasn't, we'd have to go to the tax commissioner, kind of like we did last year with those water and sewer transfers that we wanted to do. But we don't have to do any of that. It's just a regular transfer like we would normally approve. And then the sale of the assets, this is the sale of the medic vehicle less the fees that it's taking to sell it, at least to the best of my knowledge. I don't know if that's going to be quite the number, or if it's a little, it might even be a little less if there's some other things that we're selling too, but I'm not, that's the vehicle less, I believe, the 10% that I thought is what I heard that we have to pay the agent that we're selling it through. So those two things together, almost, they get us pretty close to the year of the, get us pretty close to year one of the contract. So we're only going to be out about $30,000 in year one. But then obviously in years 2 through 5, that money is coming out of income and property taxes. The other thing that we should know sooner than the next 8 weeks, hopefully by the end of this month, depending on when the county gets us our settlement sheet, we'll know how giving up that one levy really hits us. The county can make an estimate on what they think it was going to be, and that's what we have to use. So that's where this the $381,000 comes from. But until we actually start getting those settlement sheets and seeing what it actually looks like, we'll know for sure. And a piece of good news, the property valuations in Minerva Park with the reappraisal went up significantly. Historically, we've been at about $37 million property tax valuation throughout the village. And now that number is up almost 10,000. It's about 46 million. So that's, we'll see probably a little bit of that in property tax gains. And that's why I'm kind of anxious to see between this levy and the increase in value where we actually land. So we're going to come back to that valuation when we start talking about financing for projects. So that's something else to keep in the back of your mind. So if it's okay with you, can I tell you what I have in here now for projects, and then we can kind of go maybe talk about the priority of them, or if some of them are kind of being on the back burner to make room for other projects, or what I might not have in here already. Does that work?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Okay. I'm sorry to take control of the meeting, Brian. It's your meeting. You tell me what you
No,
want to do.
it may be my meeting, but you're the one with the information, so feel
Um,
free.
Okay, so we've got the big part of the pool project. We still have down here in capital outlay. So this 112,000 is the remainder of the baby pool. But we also set aside in here $10,000 to do some repairs to the floor of the main pool. So that has already been budgeted for in this. This 37, do I have the detail? There is, okay. For 21, we do have 25,000 set aside for engineering for the dredging project. And then we also have another 35,000 set aside for that we can spend out of our money that we wouldn't have to finance towards that project. So those two together, what's that, $60,000 towards that project. So if it ends up being a $400,000 or so project, we're only looking at financing around 325 of it. If it comes in less, obviously great, but that's kind of where this budget was developed with in mind, $325,000 that we'd have to finance. Here. Lands and buildings. Should have just stayed over here. We have in here. It includes about $20,000 for any equipment that we need to purchase, mowers, weeders, whatever we need, if that's the route we're still planning to go with maintenance. We did set aside money for that. And I don't know that I'm not exactly sure what exactly it is we'll need. So it may not be that much, but that was kind of what we knew would, or we hoped would cover it and not need to have more. And then, like I said, the pool, this 112 is all for the waiting pool. I went ahead and costed some debt service just to see what it does to the budget. So this originally had included 325 for the dredging, and we'd originally talked about a 1.3 target for the building. I know the amount has come in quite a bit higher than the 1.3. But that valuation that I was telling you about earlier, the $40 million, our legal debt limit is, which is the money that we're allowed to have as debt. There's a voted and an unvoted portion. You can have 5.5% of your valuation as unvoted debt. So for a $40 million-ish valuation, that's about $2 million. A little over two, it's close to 2.4 if I remember calculating it correctly. So what we can have in financing without having to go to the voters for additional funding is about 2.4 million. So the 1.7 for a building and 400,000 for dredging, those two things stay under that amount. So legally we can do it. However, financially, we'd have to kind of really think about it, because like I said, this budget was done with about $400,000 less, and you can already see what that does to us towards the end of the 5 years. So we're starting to get, we're spending roughly between $150,000 and $200,000 more a year projected in the next 5 years, which is not a bad thing because we're doing projects that have needed to be done for a long time. But at some point we do run out of money. So obviously that's a problem. I don't think it'll be as low as 95,000 because we always end up less. We try to be conservative. So we always end up with less expenses than what we have budgeted here. And typically we come in pretty close to on when it comes to the revenue side. But it's still not, I don't know what doing, I'd have to cost it out to see what doing a $1.7 million project would do. But my guess is if in doing that, year 5 definitely goes negative. And year 4 probably gets, I would say it probably ends up closer to 150 to 200,000. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about this. So it's kind of like on a mortgage where you get approved, you make $100,000 and you get approved for, hey, you can buy a $350,000 home. Yeah, you can, but does that mean you should? So that's kind of like, I feel like where we're landing with both of those projects together. Yes, we can, but at those costs, I don't know that we should. It's going to require a little more research to see what a 1.7 would cost. The 1.7, that's their estimate. I'm sure you are familiar with the local markets right now. It's really, really hard to get materials. It's a material cost. It's not a labor cost. There's a lot of, they call it the force majeure, where it's the circumstances beyond their control. You're seeing a lot of that in contracts now because just the supply chains are broken. The cost of materials is really high. So that 1.7, if things, pick up in the next 3 months and supply chains start moving and it's easier to get materials, that 1.7 number might not be, it might be high. But the flip side is if things don't get better or they get worse, then that 1.7, when we bid it, might be low. It's just going to require some more thought and some more trying to see what exactly a 1.7 would do to us that I haven't had a chance to really dig into yet. So those are the projects that are already in there. And I think I've heard that there may be some other things kind of floating around. Oh, sorry, that's just the general fund. Projects that have also been included.
Kim, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
On our 5-year forecast for revenue, do those include additional revenue from school employees from the 2 new schools? Or is that just
starting in 2024, they do.
okay?
It's probably a little low. I just kind of doubled what we're getting now. It may end up being higher than that, depending on how many employees they end up with there. But I'm just using double what we received from Hawthorne.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so 21, I do think we'll still see an increase in revenue and income tax because the homes that were, those last few homes that were finalized in 2020, they'll be included, and all the homes that were built in 2019, that were like towards the end of 2019, would have been here for an entire year in 2020. So our 2021 income tax should still be a little higher. And that's why I kind of said, once we hit May, we'll really know where that is. And then 2022, it's not quite flat. I've got for a little bit of growth in there, but not much, partly because of COVID and then partly because almost all the homes were completely built by spring of 2020. So therefore, there's really not much growth from the development left. And then in 2023, I think maybe I have the new school in 2023 opening in the fall, because the nice thing about withholding taxes like that is we get them as they're earned. We don't have to wait. We don't have the year lag with them. So if that building opens in August of 23, we'll start getting that money right away. So it'll be half a year in 23, half a year for the one school in 24, half of both schools in the fall of 24, and then both schools in all of 25. And then that should flatten out again. And you'll just see like maybe a 1 to 2%, whatever the growth in wage growth would happen to be. Okay. In the street fund, we're still showing for the Cleveland Avenue and Maplewood intersection to be done in 21. And if it has to get pushed back again, this is a fund where we can only spend it on streets. So this money is not available to do the projects that would be general fund projects, but so if we don't spend it, it's just going to sit there. So if that's still not on the radar right now and it needs to be a little later, that's fine, but it's there if we do move forward with it. And then
so we are moving, I think we're moving ahead with that lake court or shore court or whatever it's called. And what money is that separate money or just,
yes,
is it just enough?
the East Shore Court,
East Shore Court, that's it. What else? I can't remember.
that's here in the storm sewer. And we did that $600,000 transfer last year, and we're going to spend almost half of it in capital this year. So this was the final spending of the project we're currently doing because it didn't all get paid out in 2020. So some of it's going to be here. And then also we had allocated $225,000 for East Shore Court. I don't know where that number lands, but that was our last best guess of where we could be. And then what that leaves us is about $245,000 for beginning that maintenance program or another project if we have to. I know there's other issues in the storm sewer within the village that are going to need to be addressed and probably pretty quickly. So we do have a balance, but again, this is something that as of this moment, once this money's gone, we don't have a funding source. We were still working on trying to get that funding source. It just has not happened yet. So that's something I really think should be a priority, is getting that funding source moving, because I think that of our utilities, this is the one that's really going to be, it's just going to have a lot of expenses out of it. And we really need ongoing, we probably have enough to cover the big projects, but then our ongoing maintenance, we don't have a source for. And that's what
I thought that I really thought we were done with that. So I got the impression, I heard the messages, we were done. So we only did the first part, then we only did the transfer.
We only did the transfer. I think the last I recall is that Mike and legal were trying to work out if we could just, like, what exactly we needed to do, if it was just passing a resolution and telling Columbus, or if Columbus needs additional information for us. And I'm not sure exactly where that stands right now. So I had asked the mayor if she could follow up with Mike on that. Just because, like I said, we really want to get that moving.
Sure.
And just so you know, I've already sent the message to Mike. I did it earlier. So as soon as I get an update, I'll let everybody know.
Today, so. Right now, because of that surcharge, I mean, it's not hurting us overall as a village that that's not happening, because that money, we're still getting it. It's just going here in water and here in sewer,
right?
Sanitary sewer. So in the water fund, we still don't have any major projects planned. Our water line's still in pretty good shape. We've been allocating 10 to 20,000 a year for line breaks, maintenance of hydrants, and now since we are not contracting with Columbus to do the hydrants, we've got about $10,000 in here also for hydrant repairs and hydrant inspections. So that's why I do expect that number to be a lot higher in 21 than it's been in the past, but not more than, I don't think it'll be more than 20 as long as nothing breaks. And again, just for reminder, The water lines aren't ones that you do, like the sewers, you go down and scope them every so often, do the CCTV. You don't do that with the water lines. You don't really, they're working fine until proven otherwise.
Is that where the fire hydrant repair comes out of?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. And if we need to contract with someone to inspect them for us, to maintain them, it can come out of here too.
we're currently discussing all of that right now. So, and then I'll bring it back to council once we figure it out. But as you guys know, Columbus wanted $10,000, but it still didn't, my understanding was it still didn't include the actual, that was just to service them. It didn't fix broken ones. So we're gonna figure out if there's a contract that we can get with somebody that does all of the above, service them, fix them, you name it. Because right now we're just calling one person to come out and fix at their convenience. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. I just want to make sure that's where it came from.
The nice thing about that part, that you just call them to fix them, as they break, is you can see the last couple of years, I mean, there hasn't really been much maintenance that's been required on them. And I think this one in 2018, our water contract with Columbus gives us one break per year, one water line break per year. And then if there's an additional break, then we get billed for that. So I think in 2018, we did have 2 breaks, or maybe it was 2017 that we got billed in 2018, but in that time frame, we had 2 breaks. Every other year, there's only been 1. So fingers crossed that continues. So, and then in the sanitary sewer, once the project wraps up that we're finishing now, we think all our big sanitary sewer projects that we are aware of will be completed, and now we're going to get on the maintenance track for them. So in 2021, we've got some CCTV for probably, if depending on what the streets committee wants to do, but it would probably be best to start up in the Jordan Road area, because it's now been, in 2016 is when we did that big project up there, or 2017, I'm sorry, that big project up there to fix the Jordan Road area. So now it's been 4 to 5 years since that's really been scoped and cleaned. And so that probably is a good place to start, because everywhere else has been scoped in the last couple of years. So then we can get on that every 6 years, every 7 years, whatever plan that we want to get on. So that's what's happening in the sewer fund, which is a nice change of pace. So and I think that's all the projects that we've got budgeted. There is, in the facilities fund, there's still about a $65,000 balance, but I suspect that most of that's going to be taken by the architect. So it's really not going to have much to go towards the actual building itself. So that fund will get spent down this year, moving forward with that project. The EMS, this is the 92 or the 90,000 that we're going to transfer. And in the Parkland fund, I know there's various assorted projects that we're kind of talking about with that, but they're all, I don't want to say they're insignificant, but cost wise, they're not as significant as, say, the sewer project or the Shore Core project. There's a bunch of smaller projects that will add up to a pretty significant sum. So that's what's included. And if that's still council's priorities, then that's fine. If we want to talk about what if there's any different priorities, I've heard that there may be some other projects that are on the horizon that people want to talk about. So I guess we'll turn it back over to that. What do we want to do going forward?
So I actually had one other question before we get there.
Sure.
And that was, and it's probably just my own ignorance, where do we sit with collection of TIF funds and payments to MI, right? Because we're growing to a 4 million before we start to keep and use. Where are we on that?
Because it lags a year,
Mhm.
so far we've only done about it's not quite 600,000 to them. And this is also one of these things that once we get that tax settlement sheet here in the next couple of weeks, we'll really know.
Right.
Because it's going to be based off of the tax valuation as of December 31st. What we're collecting in 21 is based off the tax valuation as of December 31st, 2019. So we had I don't want to say, I don't know, let's say 75 to 80% of the homes were completed by the end of 2019.
Mhm.
So I think that valuation will be a lot higher. So I expect it almost to double what we're receiving in 2021, but in the next couple of weeks, we will know that for sure. And then probably once we get the money or that sheet to see what this one's going to be, I imagine it'll stay fairly consistent.
Yeah.
I don't expect it to grow too much more beyond that. So we're still probably looking at 2024 before we get any of the money on our end.
Okay. Got it. So that's still a ways out.
Yeah, it's a good 3 years out, I would say.
Okay.
Unless they surprise me, because like I said, with that tax valuation going up $10 million this time, maybe they will surprise us. I don't know. So
They're not going to surprise us like done this year. Surprise us though. That would be unreasonable. So
no.
right,
Not
it
quite
could
that
be 3
surprising.
years instead of 4, but not 1 year instead of 4.
Right,
Okay.
not next year. Yeah.
So then from there, I think that the two biggest priorities are the building and dredging. Right. The other people on council and the mayor can disagree with me. Now is the time. So if I think the number I saw was closer to 1.8 million than the 1.3 or 4 we were talking about earlier. And dredging, do we have an estimate on dredging as of yet?
So the worst case scenario, hang on. Yes. If you guys recall a couple months ago, let me go back. If you guys want to keep talking for a second, and then if there is anything while I get this. Actually, I
Well-
will say that the Metropolitan people, the ones that came out several years ago, he's the one that did give us an estimate. There we go. I guess I feel like this is possibly like a worst case scenario.
I seem to recall like
400
5,
grand is what I
20,
feel like.
something
Oh.
like that.
Actually, Kim, it's worse than you think. Actually, no, one of them was 436,000.
Okay.
Not for both, right?
That's
Wait,
just
that
for
was-
one. That's just for
Yeah.
the North Lake.
For
That
the
was just the North
South Lake or North Lake,
Just the North Lake.
right?
So
Yeah.
yeah, $436,750.
Off because I actually, when I was finishing doing the annual report, I did find where we finished paying off the 1999 dredging, and that was a $320-ish thousand debt issue then, and that was in $1999. So that's
Mhm.
probably for the now it's just the South Lake. So
Yeah, if we could want to do it, let's say both of them, it'd be a minimum of probably $800,000. So.
I
And
would think the South Lake is double the size, so I would think double the money.
I think
It's
1.2
because
for the full.
it's more accessible than the North Lake is. It's easier to get the trucks in and out. It's narrow. Well, to me, it's logistically, it seems like it's an easier do, which is probably why they did the South Lake 20 years ago. It's a lot easier to do than the North Lake is.
I think the largest part of the expense is the removal of the material though. Right. So
Right.
easier to get into isn't going to offset twice as much material.
Well, I don't know that it is
Not be as much
I
material?
don't know that it is because it's been done before. The South Lake has been done once and the North Lake has been accumulating for the entire time. So there
Sure.
should be more coming out of the North Lake, given the fact that it's been twice as long that it's been accumulating than the South Lake, even though the South Lake is a little bit bigger.
When they were lowered, I mean, when they were lowered, to me, they both looked equally non-deep. So I mean, you
Well,
could
they're,
make
they're
it,
not, yeah, they're not deep
that's what so I feel like if you
Anyway,
wanted to
we don't have to get into that. I was just saying,
either, it doesn't, yeah,
Number.
I would agree with you. You're talking a minimum of 800,000. My estimate would be closer to probably 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah,
Which kind of goes back to what I was saying the other night. I kind of want to see where we land. I mean, I know the North Lake's important, but for me, what's really important is the community building and seeing where we land with what that is going to cost us before we really, I mean, we have some money in for engineering or little cleanups and taking out some of the logs and helping improve the visual of it. But when it comes to dredging, I would really like to see a final, okay, give or take a couple, 10 grand, this is what we're paying for the building. Now let's stop and say, what can we do with the lake?
well, I think the thing there, well, I'm just pointing out probably the obvious, but you know, their 1.7 is just an estimate based on not having actually done the specifications and the real live documents, which we would, is the next step, which we would be paying for, is to say, okay, you have our blessing to go ahead and you know, get us the actual specifications, the plans, the numbers. At that point, and only at that point would we know if 1.7 was wishful thinking on their part or whether it is close. And if we think we should be prepared to say, you know, what if the building is not only it's 1.7, what if the building is closer to 1.9? For example, is that still good? I mean, so, but that's a building discussion though, I think, as to what is the maximum amount. I mean, we have to be realistic, which is why it's great that Kim is here, because, you know, there is only so much we can do without going to the residents for money. And in that case, is that something that we want to do? So and that's just that's a big discussion.
In
It
several
is.
meetings now, but one of the things I would like to see considered at some point in the future, and I think I've talked about this before, is a fire levy. And I feel like when we first started talking with Columbus about 2 years ago, that we kind of got the impression then that that's kind of where they wanted to head anyway. But if we can get a fire levy, that gets this $175,000 out of here, and that makes a difference for some of these projects. It also allows us, you know, say in 2022 we got a levy. I'm just throwing this out there. Obviously, I'm not expecting us to go out and do this. I'm just for discussion purposes only. If in say 2022 we got this levy, so now we have $180,000 that can go towards dredging, can go towards a project. And maybe in 2023 we have that. And then maybe in 2024, once those schools open and we have that levy going, that's the point where you can say, okay, we have enough money accumulated and we've done enough that maybe we can start talking about an income tax credit because we've got this expense out of here and it's got its own dedicated funding stream. When we calculated it out before, we were estimating that 180,000 was about the cost of a 0.5% credit. So just getting that out of there itself would be enough possibly to give that credit. And it might not be an immediate thing. It might be a 1 or 2 year overlap, but if people knew that that's what the intention was, it might go over. If you know you're going to get the lake out of it and you know you're going to get the income tax credit out of it, it might go. It might not. I don't know. I don't know how people, especially coming out of COVID and coming out of a pandemic, I don't know how people are feeling right now, but long term, I really think that's the way to go to get this money out of here. To either free it up for other things or be able to start giving back the income tax credit. And I know that's a much longer term discussion, but if it's something that people are interested in, that could free up a little bit of money in the next year or two.
Well, and I think the other part to that is that I know a lot of people haven't really talked about was the biggest fear of contracting with Columbus is they were going to double the price within a year or two. Which is why they
Right.
would not guarantee us a price lock for X amount of time. And that
Right.
was, they were blunt about it. I mean, they weren't going to do it. So they did
Right,
that.
and
to
that is kind of the
allocate it.
nice thing about the levies is they get what they get. You know, if we pass, say, a 3 mil levy, I mean, I imagine they'd want us to try and pass a levy to cover whatever 175,000 generates.
Right.
But whatever that amount is, if in the future it generates less than that, well, sorry, you have the
Right.
levy. And if it generates more than that with growth or whatever, then great. That's they take the risk that they'll get less on the hope that they'll get more.
Right.
Now, just so I understand, because I don't know things as well as I should, the levy, that would be tied to people's property taxes, correct?
Correct. And the advantage, and I think we kind of talked about this briefly too. The advantage in a community such as ours is a property tax levy normally costs less per year than your income tax does. So say you're going to give that you give that 0.5% credit. For somebody that has $100,000 income, 0.5% credit's $500. Chances are a 3, 4, 5 mil levy is not going to be $500 on your home. It might be closer to $300, which is, you know, still significant, but you're not paying $500 to pay $300. So you actually come out ahead. So that's the advantage, and why in this case, it probably would, if you sell it that way, if you explain it that way, I think people would like that. Where it hurts though is people that don't have taxable income, say someone who's on, you know, retirement or on Social Security, that's not taxable as income tax. Well, then you're raising their property taxes. So that's the trade-off.
The
And
average
that-
person.
That's what,
Go ahead.
that's what I was gonna circle around to, is then the older retired people, it's just a straight increase for them. And, you know, I don't know, that's not great, or what. I'm not an older
I will
retired
say-
person, but that is something.
Historically, I do know, just in my experience, that taxes or levies that are for something, like levies that are for fire or levies that are for recreation, they tend to be better received because they're for something. They're not just property taxes for the village. It's going to go pay for the mayor or pay for council or pay for an administrator or for, you know, whatever pork quotes is in a budget. It actually is going towards something that can only be spent on that. So that's, historically, levies like that tend to do better than levies that are just general operating levies.
And I guess, unfortunately, we've got one levy on the ballot this year in November, and then we have another one, as I recall, Tiffany, right? Next year.
She just stepped away, but
Oh,
I
she
think,
said-
you're- I
Yeah, I
think you
believe
are
we have
correct.
one more levy renewal next year. And so I think that would be interesting to have a fire levy and a regular levy on at the same time to be voted on. I think that,
Your break, and I can't remember. We didn't have anything on in 20 or 19. Is that right? We didn't have a levy on in 19, or did we have a renewal that year?
I feel like there's only 1 year we don't have something.
I think
Correct me if I'm wrong.
there were 4 levies and 2 of them were in the same, or there were 4 levies. Now there's only 3.
Mhm.
And 2 of them were in the same year. So I think it was a 3-year cycle, and then there were 2 years off. But I just can't remember. And the 2 years had been since I started. I feel like in 17 we had a renewal, and then in 18 and 19 we didn't.
Okay.
So I think you're right, Diane, it's 2021 and 22 would be the 3 years of the renewals. I'd have to double check that though, but I think that's right, because there were 2 years that I was full-time that we did not have renewals.
When do we need to get the tax certificate and all that kind of stuff to make sure that we're ready to go to have that put on the November ballot?
We probably should start doing those readings in April to get it,
Okay.
that would get it for us in May.
Okay,
And then we'd be able to do the 3 readings to have it passed. I believe July, early July is the 90-day deadline, but we'd have to
Okay.
double check that.
so we're really right when we should be starting to think about getting it, the first reading, maybe the last in March, first
Right.
April. Okay.
Yeah.
Leo, we'll talk about that tomorrow and make sure that you and I know what we're doing. As you guys know, I don't like waiting till the last minute.
Right. So, I mean, as it stands right now, it sounds to me like if we want to maintain both building and dredging as 2021 priorities, we need to get out there and find some alternate financing or alternate funds for dredging. Right, I think that's the one that we're more likely to find alternate funds for,
Right.
right? Do we want to pursue, we had talked about pursuing a grant writer. I know our grant writer wanted, didn't he? He was asking for some money to go and do the research necessary to find the grants to apply for.
Right.
Or we're kind of back to that situation, I think.
Well, let me ask this question. Getting a grant writer, and yes, he wanted around $5,000 to do the research and then $10,000 to actually do the grant. But here's my question. If we do that though, Kim, and the end result is just a 0%, just like the sewers, does that really help us, honestly, in the situation we're in? 0% versus 3.25. 3.25 is like crazy low. So is that really, I mean, a grant obviously would be beneficial. But what we actually got was 0%. So we didn't get any free money on anything that he had done for us on those. So what's your thoughts if we don't get actual free money? And maybe there is free money out there. I mean, I have no idea. And you don't know until you look.
I have a guess on, I don't have it in here, like what it actually was, but my guess is the interest, the 3.25% on the dredging one is probably around $2,500 a year.
Okay. So that's,
So
we
a little
need-
bit, but right.
and I don't think we're going to know that until we hire or somebody has the time to invest into it.
Right. And it really is the risk benefit, because it's a risk that you pay, $15,000 and you get nothing, and you still have to go find financing. But if you can find something, then the reward could be pretty great.
Exactly.
Is there, back when we were drafting the TIF, there was conversation about financing against future TIF dollars. I'm guessing that if we are not plateaued on what we are getting in future TIF dollars, we're probably nowhere near that yet either.
And actually, the mayor and I were just speaking about that a little earlier.
Oh, if you're talking, Kim, we can't quite hear you.
Sorry. The mayor and I were speaking about that a little earlier, about that very thing. If dredging, I don't know the community building as much, it probably would too, but, or at least part of it. But the dredging is definitely something that probably benefits the TIF district, which would be an allowable expense.
Mhm.
What would be, I don't want to say tricky, but like what would have to be considered is if we could get an advance funding on the TIF. That doesn't count towards that limitation on the valuation, because it's actually got a specific source. It's not general obligation debt, but we're still 3 or 4 years away from getting that money. So that doesn't make it impossible. But obviously you're not going to have 3 or 4 years before you have to repay it.
Right.
So you're going to be paying it out of the general fund to start with, which you can then reimburse once we get the TIF money. It's just the timing, making that timing work out to where having enough money to reimburse it before the general fund has a problem.
Well, it sounds
That's
like we,
the risk there.
yeah, and we're at a place where that rat race may come to a photo finish, but it doesn't feel like it's that we are entirely out of the ballpark, right? If what we're looking at with the general fund right now is
Right.
at the end of 2025, it's bone dry.
95.
Huh? Yeah, 2025, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And we are anticipating starting to actually receive funds from the TIF at about that same year. That's feeling like a.
That actually is something, if we want to explore that, I'd be very much in support of. And one of the attorneys at Ross Brown Todd, when we first talked about this, I don't remember, 3 or 4 years ago, he does a lot of this, and he we didn't go very far with it because we ended up not needing the funding, but he thought that we'd be able to do that and pay it out of the general fund and then reimburse it once we receive the TIF money.
Yeah, and so that is something that I think would be good for us to look into, right? I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but it is definitely a resource that has been discussed multiple times. It's possibly a viable option. We should probably, I think we should start to explore that, because the sooner we can get progress on the lakes, the sooner everybody will feel good about getting progress on the lakes.
Agree, completely agree.
So what do we
Talked
have to
about
do?
it.
Oh, go
I
ahead,
don't remember
Kim.
the attorney's name. Jesse will know the attorney's name. I can't remember his name offhand, who actually worked with us on that. But the reason we were talking about it then was related to 2999.
Yeah.
And they thought part of that, like the police department section of it would not be, because that would kind of be more of an operating expense as opposed to like the community building piece that the community can actually use. So it's possible that even part of the community building could be wrapped up in that funding too. So it might be worth it to explore both at the same time, because it might be easier to get, if part of it can be paid for, if part of the building can be paid for by the TIF, I mean, that frees up more general fund money, right?
Yeah.
So it might be worth asking about that too, doing it as one big project or one big funding, not necessarily one big project doing it at the same time, but one big debt funding, and being able to then reimburse part of it. So his name will come to me, I'm sure, as soon as we get off the call here. But if not, Jesse will know who he is right away. So
Mark and Diane, I just want to make sure you're on the page, you're on the same page, you understand what we're saying, right? That the idea is to inquire about borrowing funds today, based on future TIF revenue.
Well, it's not the first time that I've heard the discussion or been talked about it myself. So it's personally, I can't, I know it will cost some money to explore it, but I can't grudge that. Personally, it's not something that, if it were my finances, it would not be something that I would be. I'm not that kind of a high risk person. I'm a medium risk person, but I'm not a high risk. And at this point, I think it would be high risk, and so I wouldn't be real comfortable with it. But I certainly would be fascinated to know what it would look like.
it may actually not be, it may not cost us that much to explore it, because since the attorney is through for us, Brown Todd, the bulk of it may be covered under our retainer that we're paying already, because that's kind of a general consultation thing. At least it was at the time we did it before. And like I said, we didn't get very far with it, but what we had, that conversations that we did have, there wasn't a separate project or a separate bill for that. It was part of the retainer.
And I think one of the positive things about looking into it right now and not, we should have a little bit more information about where we stand on this year's TIF money here, like you said, in the next couple weeks or the next couple months. As we work through this, we're going to have a little bit more of a, what is it this year? Or what was it for last year type thing. So, I mean, it may ultimately surprise us, Brian, you know, like Brian had said, you know, we know it's not going to pay it off in a year, but you know, what does it really look like?
Okay. Right, so I think that the next step on that, would that be for you, Mayor Hughes, to inquire with Jesse and Frost Brown Todd to get an understanding of how that works and get some more details?
Yeah, that's probably the best thing. Jesse, I'm sure I'll know who it is right away. And I'm
Yeah.
actually Googling it right now on their website because it's going to kill me that I can't remember his name.
So yes, I absolutely will, because I have something
Okay.
else I'm gonna email Jesse about first thing tomorrow. So he just got back from leave. So I was trying to give him a couple days before I bombard him with some of my emails. So and Mike Flickinger did respond in regards to the allocations of the water fund, and we are picking that back up right now. So just as an FYI here in the next, I would go with the next 2 weeks, him and I will be able to work out some details on that for you guys.
And that was, I'm sorry to show my ignorance again, that was allocating some of the like sewer funds to a specific storm sewer fund. Is that?
Correct.
Yeah,
It's the money that you pay on your water bill. You already
Right.
pay money on your water bill. We're not asking residents to pay more money. We're just trying to reallocate the money. Instead of 50% going here, 50% going here, I think we're trying to do like 25, 25 and 50 or whatever.
Right.
30,
Yeah,
30,
yeah.
30, I don't know, but that's
It's basically creating a funding source for storm sewer.
correct.
Yeah.
And if I said that wrong, Kim, let me know, but I think that's pretty, other than the percentage, I think it's pretty accurate.
Our water lines are doing pretty well. We need to put the money towards the sewers where the problems are.
Right. Well,
And
the
I
storm,
think that it might have been something like 10, 25, and then whatever. The
Exactly.
water amount for a while is going to be pretty small.
Right.
Because as you can see, I mean, look at that balance. Even after we did the transfer, we still have $350,000 in there, and things don't, I don't want to say they never break, but they're still, in the terms of infrastructure, they're still pretty new.
Right.
So they should have quite a bit of time before we're really investing a lot of money in them.
right, our
And
water
that's
lines
the nice
are
thing
like
about the
30
surcharge is you can reallocate it again later. So if they do start going wrong, then we can say, okay, we need to take some of that money back from the sanitary sewers and put it in the water.
Our water lines are only like 30 years old, and it's supposed to be 50 to 60 years before they start having problems. So we got a little while.
Actually, I think they're even younger than that because I think they were done in early 2000s. I think
I
they were
thought
done.
they were
They were
done
done
in
in
the-
this century, I think.
I thought they were done in the 90s.
Well, we're still.
thought-
I think
I
they were
thought
done in
that-
phases.
Yeah, I thought that was the
because we're
last
still
time the
paying
village
for
had
two.
money.
Either way, they're
We're
not
still
that
paying until 2022, I think.
club.
Oh, well, but they were 30 years, right? So if we're paying till 2022, 30 years back takes you to the 90s.
No, it doesn't.
2022?
30 years ago was in the 70s. What are you talking about?
Okay, my math may not be very good then, I guess.
I lost a decade somewhere. 20 years ago was still 1998.
I like your math, just so you know.
Hmm. Yeah, so, yeah, okay, so I think that what we have talked about here is to explore funding against the TIF for our major projects in hopes to be able to move both of the two major cost / infrastructure type projects forward sooner rather than later. All right, was there anything else we needed to accomplish or discuss in this meeting? That was, I got everything I was looking for. What else are we looking for?
I don't have anything else, so I will, if you guys do, then feel free.
We lost you, Kim.
I don't have anything else that I need to bring up, so if you guys have questions, ask away.
I think we're good. Diane, anything on your end?
No, I'm good. I'm good at this point. Yep.
Then with that, I am gonna move that we adjourn and we can meet again, probably after Mayor Hughes gets some information, on the ask.
Perfect. And
Okay.
I'll email you guys at least anything that I have. Hey, Diane, I have a random question for you, but it has nothing to do with this. So stay here for 2 seconds after everybody else. I
Okay.
mean, they can hear, but
I
Are we
don't want. All right, yeah, everybody be good.
thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Bye.